Welcome to the Vibrant Guide podcast, where we explore the fascinating stories of individuals who delve into the mysteries of life and inspire us to think deeply about our own journeys. I'm your host, Anna, and today we have a guest with us whose work spans across multiple creative realms, from writing and storytelling to exploring the metaphysical aspects of our existence. Our guest today, Brownell Landrum, an accomplished author, inventor, songwriter, and host of Life is a Trip Reincarnation Stories podcast. Brownell has authored over a dozen books, including the captivating Duet Stories novel series and the thought-provoking nonfiction book, 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen. Her stories are known for digging deep into the heart and soul of the human experience, weaving together humor, mysticism, love, and life's profound questions. With a keen interest in topics like reincarnation, fate, destiny, and free will, Brownell's work invites readers and listeners to lose themselves in fiction while finding profound truths within. Today we'll dive into her journey as a storyteller and explorer of the metaphysical mysteries and what drives her to uncover the why behind the events of our life. Brownell, welcome to the Vibrant Guide podcast.
I'm thrilled to be here. I love what you're doing, and I think it's wonderful, and I'm just so honored and happy to be a part of it, and looking forward to having fun talking to you.
Yeah, so excited for our conversation. So just to start, Brownell, you have such a diverse background as an author, inventor, songwriter, and explorer of metaphysical mysteries. Can you start by sharing, what inspired you to pursue such a wide range of creative and intellectual pursuits?
And my first book was the one you mentioned, the 5 Reasons Why Bad Things Happen. So my first one was nonfiction, and I come from a marketing background, working for Coca-Cola and Kodak back when they were in their heydays, and so kind of a corporate background, so I could think, left brain linear to write a nonfiction. And at the time I wrote it, I was going through a really difficult time in my life. I had a business that failed. I was going through foreclosure of my house, losing my house. I had a relationship end. I had all these things kind of crumbling down. My dog died. And I just kept thinking there has to be a why. There has to be a why for this. And so it just kind of one day in meditation, I'm like, oh yeah, there's a why, there's 5 reasons. And so that led me into, I thought, okay, I can write nonfiction, right? I can think in that linear format. I can do the research and back it up. And then a few years later, I was like, you know what, I'm going to try fiction and see what that does. And the first story I wrote in the Duets novels was kind of basically a little love story, right? And then the next one, I was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to start going back into their past lives. And that's when I started having so much fun with these stories. And, started seeing that people, I think with fiction, that it also often has more impact on people than nonfiction, because they can suspend disbelief, just enjoy the story, and they don't have to believe in time travel to enjoy Back to the Future. You don't have to necessarily believe in reincarnation to enjoy the stories. And so I just had a lot of fun with that, and then it just kind of got bigger and bigger from there.
That's awesome. And, you mentioned being in corporate marketing. How was the transition from the corporate world to, writing your own books and doing all of this amazing things?
I used to say back, a lot of years ago when I made that transition, if I wrote an autobiography, it would be called Taking a Flying Leap, how being kicked off the cliff or pushed off the cliff from corporate America taught me to fly, right? Right. So it is a big change to be that independent, right? To go from down to this corporate-driven world to being independent and a writer, and it's also so much more meaningful, just to be able to share these stories and to be able to kind of impact people in a way that I couldn't selling, soda water, brown sugar water, or even photographs, which of course are super meaningful. But the world has changed a lot in the Kodak world, as I'm sure you can tell. But
yeah,
it's been great.
No, that's amazing. And I feel like I can definitely relate, starting my career. I definitely find so much more meaning, in doing this podcast and, finding other stories. So that's amazing that, you took that leap and left the corporate world.
That is what you're doing. You really are making such a difference. And the more that stories just make a difference, right? And so
right.
What you're doing with your podcast and how you're sharing it with others and, allowing people to hear different kinds of stories and different kind of motivations, is really, really powerful stuff. So I'm congratulate you and I'm excited for you to make this all happen. So
Thank you, Brownell. And your mantra, lose yourself in fiction, find yourself in the truth, that's so fascinating to me. Can you kind of explain what that means to you and how it influences your work?
Yes, I think, the lose yourself in the fiction, right, is you just read a story. You just get immersed in a story. You don't even kind of, like I said, you kind of suspend disbelief. and you just kind of get in there and enjoy it as a story. And you don't realize that when you're suspending that disbelief, you're opening up your mind to new possibilities. And so I've had people read some of my books, and their religion might say, oh, reincarnation, no way. But they read the books and all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, that's a possibility. And for me, I don't really even care if they end up believing reincarnation or not. I do love opening minds, right? So, when you lose yourself in the fiction, you just kind of get immersed in it. But then within that fiction, you can find the truth. And so when I did the podcast, which I'm sure you're going to get to, but, it was really important to have the stories be fictional or factual. Like, let's not get into this world where we're judging whether something's true or not, or right or not, or fits in a box or not. Let's just enjoy the stories and go from there.
That's an amazing approach. And, as you said, hearing these fiction stories, that can open your mind so much. Because, while you're reading it, you're, engaged in the book, and, you're kind of like almost as if you're like the main character. So that's amazing and a great approach. And, yeah, and Brownell, your stories often incorporate humor, mysticism, love, and life. How do you kind of balance all of these, different elements to create narratives that are both entertaining and meaningful?
I think that humor does lighten things up, right? And so you want to have characters that are enjoying life on one level or another. And sometimes you might have like a really funny character, or maybe you just have a situation that they're put in that lightens things up and and shows that kind of dimension of life. And so, and then it makes it a little easier to kind of weave in maybe something that's deeper. If it's something's too heavy and dense, then it's not as entertaining. So it's really fun to mix that up and put the characters in situations that might make them afraid, might make them laugh, might make them, run into the burning building and save, innocent children or something crazy. Give them the situations that they can explore. And if you're giving them situations where they're remembering past lives and then going into those lives, there's a lot of opportunity for some unique storytelling.
Yeah, for sure. Balancing all those different elements is really important in that storytelling that's engaging. So, you mentioned before, reincarnation is a big part of, your work, and you're very interested in it. What kind of sparked that interest for you in reincarnation?
That's a great question, because I grew up in a world that wasn't even really considered, so it wasn't discussed. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, and I think it's true with a lot of people. It's like, oh, I really never thought about it. I mean, my folks were Episcopalian, which is pretty open-minded for most Christian denominations. But it just was kind of like, well, if it wasn't mentioned, then it wasn't part of the belief system, and so I didn't really believe it. And and then I saw, and a lot of people, of course, at my age might remember Shirley MacLaine, because she was really one of the first people that came out and was like, and she wrote a book called Out on a Limb, and there was a mini series, and it was like all of a sudden all these possibilities opened up, and it's kind of like a reminder, like, oh yeah, that's how it works. It wasn't a big surprise, and I had been having a recurring dream that I know now was what I call a dreamery, right? Which is a dream that's a memory. So all of that kind of stuff kind of converged, and then it just became obvious. Even within Christianity, I mean, most Christians believe in the second coming, or that Jesus will come again. Well, how is that going to work other than reincarnation? So it's kind of already built in without even really thinking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what does reincarnation mean to you? Like, what does that look like?
That's a great question. One of the things that I have on the podcast and in my Facebook group and some of these stories is, a much looser parameter than what certain people believe. Because some people will believe a specific, thing. Some people will believe something else. And but in general, what the overarching thing is that I believe that we all have a soul. And that part of us existed before we were born and will exist after we die. And so for each lifetime, that soul chooses a body and becomes us. So like if my soul had chosen your body, that would be a very different person, or vice versa. So when you start thinking about it that way, that's the merging of what I call the three selves, right? And you can go to basic psychology and go, okay, that's the id, ego, super ego, or the conscious, subconscious, superconscious, or the mind, body, spirit. They're all kind of the same thing. And so, and it starts explaining so many things, because you see somebody like might have a short lifetime, and you think, if they only have one, how is that fair, right? I mean, like, oh, you only get to live this many days or this many years. But when you start looking and thinking, wait a minute, I've been probably every race, every religion, every nationality. I've experienced life on all these, every socioeconomic level. Then all of a sudden, like, where's racism? Because it can't be racism if I was every other race in another lifetime. So it just answers a lot of questions and makes life much more interesting to me.
Yeah, but that's an amazing perspective. I love hearing, all these different perspectives, on life. So thank you for sharing that. And, fate, destiny, and free will are other topics that you often explore in your writing. How do you personally reconcile these topics, and how do they, manifest into your characters and all of your stories that you tell?
Yeah, well, that's a fabulous question, and there's a couple of different answers for that. One is I wrote a children's book, and I'm going to recite a little section of the children's book. I've got two children's books, actually, and one of them specifically about reincarnation, and this one's kind of more about what you're asking. And there's a little section of it, and it says, we decide on our lessons, the paths we will take, awards we might go for, and mistakes we might make. For life isn't easy and not always fun, but easy is boring like games always won. So it is about how we set up before we're here. We kind of think, what's our life going to be like? Like when you chose your family and your body and your situation, what were you wanting to learn? Who are you wanting to interact with? And what kind of purpose are you delivering? And of course you are, right? You're doing it right now as far as living your purpose. So I think that the way I look at it is kind of like a roadmap that we kind of sketch out before we're born. So that's the first stage of free will, right? Is that we get to have some plan. And then when we get here, we forget, mostly. Mm-hmm. And they're like, okay, now I have to remember what I was supposed to be here for. And that makes it more fun than if we kind of remembered and then it was like, cheating on an exam or something. And then once we get here, we look at that roadmap and like we could keep turning right and go in circles, or we could, speed through an intersection. We can take the high road or the low road, right? We can make mistakes. Or we can even go off-road. So we go, and that could either be on a really good way or maybe a not so good way. So I think that's how it all works. And the story that I wrote called The End, which I want to offer all of your listeners a chance to get it for free, was really profound because as I'm writing it, I'm realizing that I'm writing truth. And it's from the perspective of what I call the upstairs. So that there are beings up there that are kind of helping us, guide us. So that's where fate and guidance and some of those other things kind of come into play is, I like to look at them like border collies. Like we might be going down this way and they go, no, we want you over here. So they'll knock us into place sometimes.
Yeah, I love that perspective. And you're also known for delving into the why behind the human experience, which is something that I'm personally, really passionate about. Why is it important to you to explore this question in your writing, and how do you approach it?
Yeah, it really does come down to the why, which is what my first book, of course, was, the 5 reasons why. So when people say, oh, everything happens for a reason, it's like, yeah, I wrote the book on it. I mean, literally wrote the book on it. And, the big why, without giving away too much of the book, but the big reason why is to get you to change, right? Things happen to you in order to get you to go down another path and to learn something in that direction. Mm-hmm. And then as I'm looking at everything, like right now I'm analyzing a relationship and I'm thinking, what's the why? What's the why? What's the why? And the more I dig deeper, the more I learn from that experience, and there's a why behind everything, and so once it's like why somebody like, why can't you get over this or move on from that? It's like when I get the why, I can move on, and it's the same with healing. You can some people are really into a lot of kind of different kinds of healing, and I've done a little bit of healing myself, and unless you get to the why of why they got whatever it is they got, then the healing doesn't really last because they still have their reason why they got it. And so they have to learn that before they can really get to healing. So it kind of affects everything.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Everything has its why. So, what advice do you have for our listeners that might, be trying to figure out why something happened or just their why and, are having trouble doing so?
That's another great question. You've got a lot of great questions.
Thank you.
I think that, of course, my book, as far as the reasons why bad things happen, one thing is I do set up within the parameters of the book. And you can go to reasonswhy.com to find sample chapters if anybody's interested, I do make it clear that I have kind of what I call the basic assumptions. So if you read those basic assumptions and that aligns with your belief system, then everything can be explained by one or more of the 5 reasons why. And so it always helps. The 5th reason, I'll just, spoiler, but the 5th reason why is that there may be something good at the end of it, right? So it's a blessing in disguise or a silver lining or something like that. And it really empowers people when they realize, okay, this is horrible. I just went through this horrible experience. I lost this business. I lost my partner. Whatever it is, went through this, trauma. Horrible, right? Nobody's diminishing the bad and the bad things. Yet maybe it can turn you into an advocate for others going through that. Maybe you'll be a guide someday, and now you have the experience of what it's like to be whatever that is. And so if you start thinking about the why, and I, some people get in a real heated debate saying, no, didn't happen for a reason. How dare you say that, I made this happen? And certainly that hurts, right, at first. But if you start realizing, and there's some psychology about it that's under the banner of self-efficacy, but it's like, wait a minute, if it did, and if I can turn it into a positive, and look at what are the benefits and what can I do to help others in this process, then I think you can really lift a lot of that darkness off and start moving in a positive direction.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like, turning bad things into lessons that can really, really like help you out in the future, and, that can turn things into stuff that helps others is so important. So yeah, I love that you shared that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And, kind of just transitioning into, your creative process, as someone who works between so many different creative disciplines, how do you stay inspired and, manage all of your time between, writing, inventing, songwriting, and producing your podcast?
Yeah, and being on your podcast.
Yeah.
I love the writing, right? So, I could just escape into writing all the time. And right now I've got my new trilogy coming out. And I'm not sure when this episode will air, but it's a trilogy about a famous couple from history that's reincarnated today to fulfill a prophecy that'll change the world. And so that took years, right? That took a lot of, 3 books, and I'm launching them all at once. And it took a lot of, heart and love. And then I get into editing, and that's not as fun as the creating, And now I'm in the marketing and making sure people are aware of it phase. And like, I'm dying to get back into writing, right? Because that's where I get really the joy and the energy flow and all of that kind of divine stuff. So, you have to kind of know this is the time for, it's kind of like, what's the saying? There's a time for reap and a time for sow. And, Ecclesiastes, there's times to be working on the marketing, and there's times to be into the creative mode. Sometimes there's times for the research mode. And just really to try to stay that focus. And, doing the podcast as well, as you said, it's called the Life is a Trip podcast. And it's not an interview podcast like this. It is one where people have stories, mostly reincarnation or similar metaphysical type stories, that they can write and submit, and we can have them recorded and put up, and so people can just go to the site and listen to stories. And that gives me a lot of joy because I can support other writers as they're, trying to build their careers and get more of these stories out in the world.
Yeah, I love that. And, you mentioned that you don't like doing the editing as much, which is definitely something that I can relate to in my own life. So how do you, keep pushing through doing all the things that are kind of boring and kind of that you don't want to do? Like, how do you, continue being motivated?
Well, for this particular series, I decided I really want to make it, I want to do everything I can to get it out in the world. And so I got a book marketing coach. And so I have a weekly call with her. So that accountability really helps. And she's like, okay, but you got to launch it by this date. And so if you can't meet this timing, then you may have to wait several more months. And I'm like, okay, that's motivation. And I like to have a routine. This has been an interesting last year for me, where I was kind of living in the same place and solid for many years. And then all of a sudden my landlord raised the rent 50%. So I decided I'm living this nomadic life, and I'm going to Italy for a few months. And then I went to Tunisia for 3.5 months.
Wow.
Yeah, and now I'm in a hotel. Like I don't know where I'm going to be. I'm in this really really fluid place. But if you read the story, you'll kind of understand some of the background there. Um, but I do allow myself to have a routine, and so and in my life now, and in the resort in Tunisia, I didn't have to cook. I didn't have to clean. I didn't have to do anything other than my usual get up, work, write, get on social media to keep engaged with the people there, and get the work done and work out. And I didn't have I eliminated all of the other kind of daily stuff that a lot of people have to deal with, so that helped.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And since you mentioned it, how has traveling this past year been? Like, what's that experience been like for you?
It's been really incredible. I highly recommend it, as a way, like little things that we get used to in our life when we get kind of in a rut, like, oh, well, my mattress isn't, firm enough, or my pillow isn't right. And you're like, when you're traveling, you get the mattress you get the pillow you get, you have to learn to adapt. And, it's been, of course, like I said, if you read the story, The End, it's called The End, that I'm offering for free, you'll see kind of like, oh, wow, this is what her, what she was like guided to do. And it was just fascinating to spend, 3 months in Italy. And since a lot of my story is of the We Meet Again story is set in Italy, that was really, there's some very incredible experiences. And then, I had to go somewhere else for 3 months because I couldn't stay in Europe for longer than 3 months. And so I went to Tunisia, and just, that was kind of on a whim, but I found this beautiful resort for $1,000 a month, including 2 meals a day. So I'm like, sign me up. And so I got to a whole new exposure of a whole new culture, and there was a lot of time there that I was there that there wasn't anybody to really speak English with. So, it was such a different kind of experience. So it was really fun.
Yeah, no, that sounds amazing. I'm jealous. So glad you got to experience that. And, adapting to different challenges. And, speaking of challenges, what has been your most, difficult project to date? And how did you, overcome the obstacles and facing the creative process?
Boy, that's another fantastic question. Obviously, when I wrote my first book, it was about the bad things happen, so I was dealing with a lot of challenges there. And for me, it was a business that I loved, and as you know, I've got kind of a spiritual element within my whole being.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like it was an existential crisis. It wasn't just a business failure, it was an existential crisis, and a kind of a spiritual crisis, even. Like, okay, I was doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing and guided to be doing, to see it fail. So it took a lot of really powerful and deep dive into not just the earthly reasons why it didn't work, but like, why did I not feel supported? And it's interesting because that was many years ago, but then all of a sudden now I'm in this life where, and as I write in the story, they're in charge and I'm just doing whatever they want me to do. So I don't know where I'm going to be. Like, I don't even have a car. I could go anywhere tomorrow. And I don't know where that's going to be. I don't know what they want for me. So I'm just kind of, I won't say living day to day, because I do know that, like, I'm focusing on getting the books launched, but from there, I don't know. Like, I don't know where they want me to be. So it's an interesting place to be in life, is to say, okay, I'm, like you said, how do you handle challenges? Now I'm just like, okay, you guys, and they reward me when I do what they want me to do. So I at least get that kind of reinforcement, like, okay, I'm on the right track if they're, if they make me happy on that day. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, definitely. That reinforcement for sure must be super rewarding. So, throughout the years, you've built a unique and loyal following with your podcasts and books. How do you, connect to your audience, and what feedback have you received that's been particularly impactful or inspiring?
That's a terrific question. And I guess two answers. One is this last year, because I've been through this craziness of giving everything I had away except what could have fit into 3 suitcases. And then I just decided, on social media, which is primarily on Facebook, I'm just telling people what I'm doing and thinking, like, why would they care? Like, and they're fascinated by it. Like, really what you're doing, and the things I've tried. And I even went to Barcelona to do, legally, to do a Bufo trip. And I don't know if you know about Bufo, but it opens up the neurotransmitters in your brain. I mean, it's a really, really powerful experience. And they were interested. So like the more I shared, the more I realized people actually kind of were interested. And then the other part of the answer to your question is really about some of the responses I've gotten from fans. And I even had one tell me like how profoundly my books changed her life and like even saved her life. Wow. And I'm telling you, when you hear something like that drives you forever. Like you can have a bad day, but you're like, yes, but if I can keep going and make this day count and try to get this done and go through this challenge of getting the book published and getting the, all the little technical stuff that you have to do, it's worth it if you can reach even one person in that way. It's really, really incredible.
Yeah, that must be incredible, hearing such a thing from someone. So that's amazing, the impact that you're having on all these people. And what do you hope what your audience takes away in terms of their spiritual journey and just, their life journey from all of your work?
Yes, I hope, first of all, as I said, it's not up to me to try to convince somebody of a belief system. If anything, I want to just have people open to possibilities and find what their own truth is. And in the process, be entertained and enjoy. And, some of the stories, and not just by my stories, but by the other stories on the podcast. And like some of them are serious, and like there's one that I wrote in particular that is about a teen girl that is suicidal and how her transformation from that and how she got some more meaning. And yes, it ties to past life, so I'll just leave it there. But and then there's others, like I've got somebody else writing a ghost story that's really, really funny. And so it doesn't have to be, again, it can be fictional or factual. It doesn't have to force somebody down a particular way. So I hope that people just kind of open up their mind, enjoy these stories, and talk about it, and and just let people believe what they feel inclined to believe without a whole lot of judgment.
Yeah, that's an amazing message. And it can definitely be difficult to open your mind, especially if you have a really set belief. So how do you recommend people, start to open up their mind to new ideas, just to even like listen to them?
Yeah, I think like if you check out my Facebook group, which is called Life is a Trip Reincarnation Stories, you'll see the way we interact with each other. It's a very loving and supportive environment. And if somebody comes in and goes, "You're crazy," or "You're wrong," or "That's not how it works," we come in and gently kind of nudge them, back into this, like the rules are, we're an open-minded group and we're not forcing people into beliefs. And so people feel much more free to tell their stories. And the other thing I tell people is, like, let's say you think, oh, well, I think I might have lived a lifetime, as a princess, in Japan, in the 500 AD or whatever, and I'd be like, then start writing, because as you write your story, the truth will come out, or at least whether you can prove it or not, it'll be something you need to learn, you need to experience, right? So that's kind of a conduit for whatever you want to call the guides or whatever, angels, you can use whatever language, can help you open up your mind, like, okay, maybe I need to explore this because I've got this thing coming up in my life that I need to learn, or I've got this issue to resolve.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I definitely relate to the, just write thing, because I feel like you can find so much about yourself out just from, writing and, letting your subconscious mind kind of take over. So that's awesome that you brought that up.
Thanks.
Yeah, and then, in terms of your trilogy coming out, We Meet Again, that sounds super fascinating. Can you kind of give us a sneak peek into what readers can expect from the series?
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm really, really excited. As I said, I've been working on it for quite a while. And it's 3 books, so it's a trilogy. They're all coming out at once, so you don't have to go, oh God, I have to wait a year. You can read them at once. Overall, the trilogy is really about a famous couple from history. I won't tell you who, but you might have picked up the first place I went to travel to as being some kind of a hint. So I'll kind of like go, wait a minute, what did she say? And that there's this kind of a secret society. It's kind of like a Da Vinci Code meets Outlander with a reincarnation theme, because it's got this epic love story where this couple, is from a famous couple from history. they're reincarnated today. So you can imagine, like, let's say you just meet somebody and all of a sudden you realize, oh crap, we were famous, in this other lifetime. And then they start realizing that they have a purpose. And so, and that's part of their journey. And of course, if you're reincarnated to fulfill a prophecy that'll change the world, a lot of people don't want the world to change. So there are oppositional forces that either want to change it their way or, want to suppress the information. And so it starts out in current day. And then the first book goes back to a previous lifetime in 1930s Brazil as they're protecting a precious painting. And so, and then the second book, they go back to another lifetime in the 1500s. And she's an Austrian princess and he's an artist apprentice. And they meet in Austria, but they go up to London and they meet Shakespeare and John Dee and some other people on their journey. And that's when they're starting to really learn about this society that has this secret and has this prophecy. And she realizes, oh wait, they're brought back together because they were this famous couple. And so in the third book, it goes more into who the famous couple was and how it all kind of began. And then they're led on a Da Vinci Code type of mystery, like they have to find this clue and this clue and this clue to be able to fulfill that prophecy. So it's it was just so much fun to write, and I love the characters, and as I say in my story, the end, you're like, is the end ever the end if it's a reincarnation story, right? I mean, it could keep going forever. But this particular mystery and all this prophecy stuff happens in the first three books. So I just loved it. And so I hope readers love it too.
No, that sounds so interesting. I really want to read it, so I'm so excited for when it comes out. And, are you working on any other projects? And, where do you see yourself going next in your creative journey?
Well, one hope, because we all hope, but I did write We Meet Again to the way I structured it, because I also write screenplays, as you mentioned. I structured it to actually be really instantly adaptable to television. So that would be like super fun. And I met with an agent who's like, I see that as a TV series. I'm like, good, because that's what I want. So that may happen, and that would be a fun thing. I mean, I can only control to a certain degree. And then there's a couple of books that I'm in the process, kind of halfway through writing. One is a young adult book that I've written the screenplay, but I'm writing the book version. And that one's going to be especially interesting because it's written from the point of view, if you know much about writing, it's written from first person plural.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and only like a dozen books in history have ever been written in first person plural. So it's a unique thing. But it really is about a team, and so it's written from the perspective of the team. So nothing is in the book that the whole team doesn't know. So if one character has a little secret, we won't know it unless the team knows it. So that's really a fun challenge. And so I want to get back and finish that. And then the other one is I wrote a movie screenplay that's actually a musical. And it's kind of like It's a Wonderful Life meets The Big Chill, which of course both are, older movies for you, but as a musical. And I started writing it as a really unique structure for a book, and want to go and finish that. So when I can get back into writing, and of course, like as I mentioned, the story The End that I'm offering everyone, I've got an idea for the sequel on that. So that one will be the first one because it'll be a short story. So it won't be more than a few thousand words. But I started writing. I was like, okay, it's like knocking on my door saying, please, please, please write me.
Yeah, that's awesome. These are all super exciting things. And, if you had a TV show written off one of, your books, that would be amazing. So best of luck with all of that. And, what is the final message that you want to tell my listeners?
Well, first of all, I think, get to your why, right? I mean, as a person, the more you can kind of understand that maybe, that some of the things that are happening in your life might be either guided or might be, I don't believe in full predestination, like everything's planned ahead, because then what would be the fun in that, So, yeah. We got to make mistakes, and it's just like any book, right? You got to have obstacles and conflict and all those things. But if the more people can start getting to their why and start understanding, like maybe this could be tied to another life, or maybe this relationship could be that. And I'd love to think that they're going to list that the stories that I'm providing, either the ones I'm writing or the ones on the podcast or the ones in the Facebook group, can give them that kind of inspiration to start thinking, what about me? You know, how might this be affecting my life? And the more you dig into that, the more I think that you can enhance your life and have more fun and, you know, just have a better experience.
That's an amazing message. And where can our listeners, find more about your books, podcasts, and other projects and connect with you?
Yeah, well, I'm Brownell Landrum. I'm the only Brownell Landrum in the world. so it's pretty easy to find me in that regard. You know, brownelllandrum.com. You can find me Brownell Landrum on Facebook. The Life is a Trip Reincarnation Stories on Facebook is, of course, what I'd love people to join if they're inclined. And then I'm sure you're going to give them a link to my story, The End, so that they can download that for free. And hopefully they'll check me out on Amazon and the other book services to be able to get my We Meet Again books and enjoy that too. So I got a lot of stuff, a lot of ways people can maybe keep in touch.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Vibrant Guide podcast, Brownell. It was so amazing hearing your story and all of your, unique perspectives and advice, and I'm sure my listeners will love that as well. And thank you guys so much for tuning into this week's episode of the Vibrant Guide podcast. I will see you all next week.